Really appreciate that. So at this stage, you're thinking, where did Jennifer go? She went backstage. So what she's going to be doing is she is manning our chat box on the right-hand side. And hello, everybody. It's so exciting to see people from all over the world. I know some of you are meant to be in China and you're in Johannesburg. I know we have someone, Manola, from Luxembourg. I know we have people from Cape Town. So it really is wonderful to see everyone, and we'd really like you to please participate in our discussion. You can ask questions. You'll see a little place there at the bottom, ask a question. So please ask your questions there. Jen will run any polls that need to be run. And at the end, she'll give us a chance to answer the questions that you've posted. But if there's lots of questions, she might just pop up during our chat, and then she'll flag us that we can answer those. So I am super excited about today. And as Jen said, it's all about Maya Angelou's quote, which is about when we learn, we give, we share. And Jennifer, I mean, I think if you've been at a touch-based webinar before, you'll know us by now. But just before lockdown, Jennifer van Riet from Silver 17 Consulting and I, Jane Moores from Outer Box Thinking, decided that we really wanted to collaborate to be able to provide our clients with expert information by interviewing people on different topics that are relevant to our industry. And we so appreciate the people who have been on our touch-based masterclasses, right from people who've been sharing about remote work to our most recent one on RecOps, and today on breaking down barriers and overcoming bias, which is such a relevant and such an important topic, and very close to our hearts, especially as South Africans. So Jennifer is normally using advanced Boolean search to source candidates, and she'll share our LinkedIn profiles in the chat box. We'd love to connect with you. I'm normally training companies on how to hire the right people and helping coaching candidates transition into their careers. But today we have Luntu and Tsidi. Tsidi is just reconnecting. And Luntu is here, so we're very grateful for that. And Luntu, welcome, and we'll welcome Tsidi just now when she joins us. But if you don't know Luntu, Luntu Masiza is a South African actor. And I love drama, studied some of it myself, but wasn't good enough to be in the position that Luntu is in right now as a South African actor. But what I love about Luntu's experience is he hasn't just used his experience and expertise for the stage, but he's brought those tools and that knowledge and that expertise into the workplace. And he's founded Changing Your Business Through Theatre, which is a company that goes into organizations and helps people break down barriers through addressing elements of bias and helping to establish that human connection. So welcome, Luntu. We are super excited to have you here and are very excited to hear about the impact that you've made on people through the work that you've done. I know Luntu did a video for us, Luntu. Thank you so much. I know I'll ask Jen to share it into the chat box. But Luntu, you showed us. Can you just show us those exercises again that you do before you go on webinars?
Yeah, no, thank you. You put me on the spot. Yes.
Actors, you can do that with actors. You can put them on the spot. They always cope.
No, that's fine. So one of the things what I try to do, Jen, is, in order to articulate myself with clarity when I'm in a Zoom meeting or when I'm presenting in front of people, I try to make sure that I loosen up the muscles around my tongue, around my mouth. So, simple, taking my tongue and going around my teeth. That's it. And we do a little sound as well. And just to kind of loosen up your lips, just get them nice and flowing so you can articulate yourself with clarity, that you can be able to hear me and you can hear every word that comes out of me. So that's just some of the tips that we use. But then there's also breathing exercises which are really important so that you don't speak and then we lose you and we can't hear you.
I love it, Luntu. I love it. How just even those little tips and tricks that you've learned as an actor help people in the Zoom meetings and webinars and things that all of us are in so often today. and so
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you have people, so I think there's more pressure. So you can be, when you are nervous, and then also now you can't articulate yourself. So that's two things. If you can be able to at least articulate yourself, and then now you're also nervous, then you have more chances of controlling those nerves and kind of, managing them and working out. And so you've got an upper hand rather than being nervous and can't articulate yourself properly. And that's it sort of really makes you feel bad, like, oh my gosh, at least if you get one right, it's going to help you to access into something else, and you control those nerves much better.
No, absolutely. Super helpful. I see
Yeah.
Jen has popped up. Is there something you want to share with us, Jen?
Yes, I'm a little bit sad because it looks like Tidi has a power failure where she is, and I don't think she's been able to come back on. So I think that it's just going to be the two of you. I'm going to keep trying to get Tidi back, but if it doesn't work, then we just have another guest for touch base. Wow!
There we go.
Hey, Tidi! We're so happy to have you back. With that, I'm going to jump back into the sidebar, everyone.
Thanks, Jen. Welcome, Tidi. There's so many of these technical things that we learn to kind of take as business as usual in our virtual connection. So there's a little bit of a background noise there, Tidi, but we're really glad that we can at least see you. There we go. I'm sure we'll sort it out just now. But until we can connect with Tidi, I'm sure she'll work with Jen. That's why Jen is there. She's an expert on the tech side. Luntu, I think something that I really appreciated about those exercises, it's not just because they help us feel relaxed, but I know I used them when I was training people to go for interviews, because that's where I see a lot of bias in my work. In training hiring managers to interview the right people and to be able to select the right people, bias can really get in the way. And candidates, when they go for interviews, have to be really aware of the types of biases that are out there, and that people might be looking at them through different lenses. So I know Jenna's got a couple of links that she can share on that, on the types of biases that come up in interviews. But I was sharing your video so that candidates can get relaxed before an interview. They can breathe so that they can make a better impression, and so that people don't necessarily slip into a negative the horns and halo effect, the horn side of the horns and halo effect, when they're being interviewed for different roles.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Tidi, it looks like we can hear you again.
Yes, I am on. We are load shedded, but I joined on my hotspot.
Well done, Tidi. Pivoting. That's what we all do during this time. That's how I know you. So, Tidi, I was introducing Luntu, and we were talking about a fun video that he had created for me when I was training people on overcoming bias when it comes to first impressions. And so I'm excited that we can also introduce you now as well. And I know that you have a lot of experience as a coach, and that's where we're connected, as well as friends for many years. But you are somebody who works in diversity and inclusion, change management, and also organizational culture. And you're based in Pretoria, whereas Luntu and I and Jen are in Cape Town.
Yeah.
And you've worked for many years helping people to uncover bias in the workplace, and helping people break down the barriers, also to form that human connection that you're very passionate about.
Yes.
So we're also very excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane.
So maybe we can just start off by unpacking bias a little bit, because, perhaps not all of us even have the same definition of bias. So Tidi, maybe we can start with you, and then Luntu, you can share after Tidi. But Tidi, please share with us, what does bias mean for you? Where have you seen it, and how is it defined from your perspective and your experience?
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jane. First of all, bias can be favorable or unfavorable. But it is a tendency to kind of or a trend to look at certain qualities and define everybody within those qualities and it's preconceived, and it's unreasonable. It has not been reasoned out. It has not been an assessment that is grounded. So you favor or you do not favor based on your preconceived ideas. But I think what I work with a lot with companies is unfair bias, which is where now the inclination is to prejudice those people that you do not favor, or those groups of people or the behaviors that you do not favor. And unfair bias in the workplace tends to lead to a lot of division and a lot of toxicity as well in the environment. Thank you.
No, very true. And I think what you say about it being unfounded is so true, that it's really based on us and our own preconceptions based on our own experience and personality. So as you say, it can be very unfair and lead to division and toxicity. Thanks, Tidi.
Yeah.
And Luntu, your definition, where have you seen it? What's your experience been of what bias means?
Yeah, sure. So I think what I can talk about perhaps, Jane, what I've probably seen in the space of, let's say, rehearsals and stuff, and when sometimes we look down, or when a director looks down on someone, and not trust the abilities that they're able to do that, so they don't trust them with the process of the work, and they'll probably favor someone else with more strength, or that person who seems to be more outspoken, who's confident in their own abilities. And then you find that person really losing their voice and not being able then to articulate themselves, not being able to be their true, authentic self. So that's affected by the bias from the hierarchy, you can say. And that you can see within companies and workspaces, where you've got someone in management who favors a certain person because of their personality, and maybe the other person is probably putting in just as much work, and they're just not able to articulate themselves as clearly as the other person. So there's so many dynamics that we can always see within people's behavior, and sometimes it is for their own sort of self-gain, and they are driven. There's so many factors that can be driven by bias.
Yeah, I think that's what you say is so true, and it really kind of resonates, I guess, with the kind of work that you do, that it causes people to lose their own voice. Which is sad, I think. And you touched on a couple of issues where you've seen it. Hierarchy, for example, is a place where you've seen bias in the workplace, and even based on personality. Cindy, where have you seen bias in the workplace? What types of things have caused bias, in the workplaces that you've been in?
Thanks, Jane. If I can just start with how I see the barriers in the workplace. I think one of the things that we fail to do is to acknowledge the similarities. And I see barriers where we do not acknowledge the similarities, and where we take the differences and give them a negative meaning. For example, Luntu is a very rich, diverse person. He is Zulu on the side of his fathers, he's Xhosa on the side of his mothers, but he was raised in the UK as well. So depending on the meaning that I give to that, if I give it a negative meaning, it will create a barrier. Then I will not reach out to him simply because maybe I'm a different ethnicity. Whereas if I appreciate the differences and the richness that those differences may bring to the table, I will welcome him to say, wow, it will be almost a mood of curiosity and wonder to say, oh, wow, Xhosa, Zulu, raised up in the UK, what can we build together that can be powerful?
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Tidi, and appreciating that diversity. And I think what I've seen, even in our previous interaction where the four of us were talking, and you talked about his surname and the possible connection that in terms of your families, that you might know each other based on where you come from. And I love that about you, that you're someone who really seeks to connect, not just through the differences, but also through the similarities that we might have with people.
Thanks, Jane. But that just in terms of where I have seen barriers, because of that lack of acceptance, there's nothing wrong about being different. We cannot give differences a negative meaning. So the unfair bias, as I said, bias can be positive and negative, but I'm going to focus mainly on the unfair bias, especially the unfair unconscious bias. That bias can be seen through in unfair discrimination, where people are treated differently because they belong to a certain group or a certain rank in the organization. And it also can be seen where decisions are made based on unconscious bias that have not been checked and grounded. It can be, the biggest barrier can also be where there's an ideology of superiority of one group over another, or supremacy, whether it is age or race or sexuality, but also where there is no visible commitment to diversity and inclusion from the top. That is just, there is lip service, but there is no dedicated commitment. Okay. And for this to work also, it's where policies, procedures, and practices are unclear, or they are implemented in an inconsistent way. So people don't find a recourse where they can go, and that does not help to change the culture of the organization to an all-inclusive organization.
Yeah, that's so true, Tsidi. And I think that's something that has come up a lot for people around this pandemic and around, the recent, horrible happenings around racism and bias that we've seen worldwide, is people are saying they're no longer happy with a company just saying, oh, we embrace diversity and inclusion. They actually want to see a practical intolerance for intolerance in the workplace. As you say, it shouldn't be unclear or inconsistent. Even candidates wanting to join organizations that we see from our side in the recruitment industry are concerned about, how is a company actually applying this, or are they just saying it? And I think a couple of organizations have had the spotlight on them during this time, because they come up and showcase themselves as people who are in fact just saying that they are intolerant to intolerance, but in practice, maybe not so much. So I really appreciate your point.
Thank you.
Lunta, from your side, is there anything you'd like to add there on you've mentioned hierarchy, you've mentioned personality, you've heard what Tsidi shared.
No, I think it's such a great point in terms of when we talk about, there's so many companies or so many people talk about the stuff that they do, they implement, but in reality, they don't, in a lot of companies. So I am part of a movement, and it's called the Black Business Growth Initiative. And some of the people who come to our events are people who work in corporate spaces, and they say some of the issues that they have within a corporate space, they might be an MD, they might be in a high position, but they don't really have a say, and they've kind of just been put there for the sake of just being put there, and just to be able to reach whatever scores that they need to get, whether it's BEE, etc. And then and for me, that is so problematic, because there is no value in there is no value in the person, there is no trust in the person, there is no sort of looking at bigger opportunities with that person. They've just been placed there for the sake of being placed there, and then they become voiceless again, going back to that thing. They don't really have a voice because they'll never be heard. So they even start shooting themselves down and even doubting sometimes their own abilities, and then they lose confidence in themselves.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so true, Luntu. In fact, I even read something that Liz van Sale posted on LinkedIn this morning, where she was talking about that exact issue, where it's when people implement affirmative action policies, but just as a tick box exercise, that it can actually be very negative. And a couple of friends of mine, I know one kind of in South Africa, for our global participants, we have the Employment Equity Act, which is really an effort to help South Africans become more diverse and inclusive in the workplace from a hiring perspective. And this one friend of mine was saying, Jane, she's a kind of middle-aged Black female, and she was saying, Jane, I find it fairly easy to find a job. But my challenge comes that when I'm in the job, I have people looking at me saying, you only got this job because you're Black and you're female.
Yeah.
And they don't treat me as if I'm really someone who has the skill for that position. And as you say, Luntu, she feels that it takes away her voice. Just that bias, that preconception.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just like the conversation, but Jane, I think intolerance really resonates. Because companies that I worked with talk about zero tolerance to maybe issues of unfair discrimination or racism or sexism or homosexuality or whatever. But I think we cannot overnight create a I call them non-isms environment. We've tried over the years from the slave trade, etc. So to start working towards anti, it's important. Because when we are anti, we therefore put up actions that are saying no to people not having a voice. We put up actions that are saying no to certain people being at certain levels in the organization. So we change the narrative such that people can be allowed at different people who bring different diversities, and therefore the richness can be allowed at different levels to be able to make a difference in the organization. So it's just important to be able to be open to that, because people have a voice. What comes out, the creativity and the innovation is amazing, because people support what they've had to create. Just by creating that space for them, it's like they own it. They have created it.
Yes.
So those are some of the things that we can do to be able to break these barriers in the workplace. Thank you.
Yeah, I love your appreciation for diversity and what it brings. And I know it does bring innovation. And when I was speaking to a colleague, actually someone we interviewed on a previous webinar, Chris Smith in the US, I was sharing with her about the legislation we have in place to be able to encourage diversity. And she said to me, Jane, do you have legislation to do that? Because here we just know that you should do it because it adds to productivity and companies are more productive and they're more innovative. So it's such a truth that it's needed. But sometimes people kind of see it as, it's just something we have to do. But so Tsidi, I see that, from what you're saying in terms of breaking down barriers, part of breaking down barriers means appreciating the benefits of diversity. And as you said in the beginning, really appreciating the differences between us and seeing them as very positive. Is there anything else you want to add to that in terms of what breaking down barriers means for you and from your perspective?
I think it's breaking down barriers is creating an all-inclusive environment where people from all different walks of life, obviously we're looking at the capability and what they can do, are given a space and they're given a voice and they are heard and they are allowed. They are treated like what you call in coaching, we call it a legitimate other. They are legitimized. They feel like they matter. They feel like they belong. There's nothing as devastating as having, as another man told me, somebody who's a minister in their let's say their community, and they go to work and they're undermined. It creates a split personality mentality with them, and they have internal negative conversations with themselves.
Yes, I remember you sharing about that. CD, can you share that story with us? There was someone
This gentleman works for a company that I worked for before I went on my own as an entrepreneur. And he was taking care of the stationery. So we would go and ask for stationery from him, and he would give us the stationery, but he would also manage and control it. Some people referred to him as a stationery boy, which was already derogatory because he was an older man, far older than most of us. And we called him Ubaba, which means a dad, father. It's a respectful way of calling him. But he would share stories when he started doing this work in the company that I was working with on all inclusivity and diversity. He spoke about how he never had a word for what was happening to him, because in the workplace, he's treated like he's nothing. he's called, even his real name is not used. He was given the name John because it was easier to pronounce.
Yeah.
And that on its own harms his self-respect, harms his dignity. And it takes him to moods and emotions that are not helpful for him. When he gets home, he almost feels like before entering his house, he needs to almost put on a different coat, a different jacket that will make people realize who he is. Because here he's respected, he's the head of the family, but not only that, he's actually a minister in the community. So that can be a difficult situation to carry as an individual, and it can put you in the most undesirable and unresourceful place, so to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story, Tidi. I think it really touches on my heart, and I think it touches on many people's hearts. Just how bias and preconceived ideas and stereotypes can really hurt people as individuals.
Yeah, there's something that I want to mention that I saw in the chat on the side. Somebody spoke about personal values versus company values. There is a concept in African culture, and I think a lot of South Africans would know it, called Ubuntu. But really, it's about saying, I am because you are. In other words, it's the saying, no person is an island. We coexist. We are interdependent. The companies I have worked with, I've helped them to come up with values of Ubuntu that are humane. So if a value is humane, it is not likely to contradict my value. Another company said, we care for one another. And another company said, we love one another. So there is no contradiction there, because we're seeking all to adhere to the principles of Ubuntu. But also, it's not just values that are created by the company, but they are shared with everybody, and they become shared values, so to speak. The other thing that is prevalent in the workplace is ageism. I do a lot of work on recognizing the different generation gaps and what they bring with them. What do the Gen Z bring with them? What do the baby boomers bring with them? And also, it's young people sometimes need to stop and listen and appreciate the wisdom that can come with age. But also, as older people, we need to appreciate the innovation and the creativity that younger people can bring. So again, there you see the richness of the diversity. Yeah. We don't label them because they are older. We don't label them, or because they are younger, we don't label them. We pull them together to see what is this beautiful, beautiful thing that you can create. And in South Africa, we are known for a richness in diversity. We are known for that. We just have to make it alive and make it work. Thank you.
I love that, Tidi. Thank you for sharing that. I see Jen has popped up. So Jen, is there something you want to share or a question?
I have to say this conversation is so enriching to my soul. I really am loving the fact that we can all speak like this together. That being said, I did put up a poll, and the poll is, have you experienced bias? Where 90% of respondents said that they did experience bias. So, if we experience it, we also must be aware when we have bias. That's my mention I wanted to say. And then we've got two very interesting questions here. The first one from Andrea says, okay, here's a question that revolves around fairness. So for me, I want to work with people who have the same mindset as me, regardless of anything else. Race, age, gender, etc. It's not important. For me, it's the mindset. So here's the question. Does anybody feel that surrounding yourself in terms of work, etc., only with the people that you can identify with, again, based on personal bias to a mindset type, would that be viewed as unfair? I would not think so. So I just want to quickly make a mention here before we go on to our panel, is when you are not diverse in your company, when you don't have young people, old people, representatives of your culture, and even global representatives, it's all good and well to surround yourself with the same people, but you know what you're going to have? You're going to have the same blind spot, and that blind spot can cause your business to fail. Creativity, we've seen, Tidi mentioned it, creativity comes when there's multiple inputs. So when you feel uncomfortable, that is something that you have to work on in yourself. Diversity brings a whole plethora, a kaleidoscope of different inputs, and that is what makes your company strong. Tidi, Jane, Luntu, I don't know what you feel about this question.
Jen, I appreciate everything that you have said. I truly appreciate the way that you handled it. In a nutshell, it limits you. So because here from people with exactly the same mindset as you, so you're not challenged to think out of the box. Things are just going to be what they are all the time. So you're not getting the opportunity of getting different ideas. And yes, you're right. You won't see your blind spots. I'll give you an example. I worked with a company and I was checking their policies and procedures. And the policy said no open shoes are allowed. It was not a mining organization. So I was wondering what was happening here. So when I traced back the history of the policy, it was put together by men, and the youth had begun to wear, when young people wear those hang ten open shoes that are meant to be casual. So what we had to sit down and talk about it, because what they really wanted was formality to a certain degree in the workplace. But when they said no open shoes, it excluded me as a woman from wearing a sandal. And when we got to that simple thing like that, they were like, oh my goodness, we never even thought about it. And of course, you wouldn't think about it because you are just a group of men who are like-minded, who have got the same mindsets. And I know I'm using gender here, but it could be mixed different genders and races, but the mindset is the same. So you want to pick up on things that people with a different mindset would pick up on. So it's like we need movers, we need opposers, we need those from a 4-player model perspective. We need those who move, those who oppose, those who are bystanders, and those who follow. When you've got all of those different types of people, the richness that comes out of that is amazing, depending on how they use their inclinations.
Absolutely.
And yes, Celeste, you needed the Rainbow Nation, but the Rainbow Nation, I see Celeste has posted Rainbow Nation, but the Rainbow Nation, that is really practical, and we come to in terms with who we are, and we really make it work. Thank you.
That's true. We can't just hope say now we're a Rainbow Nation, now there's going to be little birds singing and the butterflies are going and everything is well. We have to work. Each one of us have to work devotedly to ensure that we are moving where we are moving. So Luntu, what do you have to add to this? It's a very good question.
No, it's a very good question. I think for me, when we stuck or just stick to the same people that we know, there isn't any room sometimes to growth. And I think for me, growth comes when it's enriched by different cultures, different ages. When there is a mixture, it's almost as if you're making your shake or your smoothie. You've got you got strawberries, you've got so many different fruits in there, and you blend it all together, and it becomes one thing, and it tastes so nice. If it's just strawberries, it doesn't. It's just got the same sort of taste, bland, and it's just like, yeah, that's it. But then when you have a mixture of different things, it enriches the company. It enriches just conversation that take place. You get to know one another, because it is through people that when we interact with different people, different cultures, where they will also see growth within each other. You get to learn about one another's culture. You get to learn about the other person, and there's something magical about that. I talk as a theater maker, as an actor. When I work with a group of actors, not just for my community, but from different communities, yes, we will argue. Yes, we'll conflict with certain things, but then we have a better understanding of one another by the time the project is finished. And then when we honor the story, when we have to perform the story, now it's like, actually, these themes, we understand this as a collective, what it means to us to tell the story. It is not just about me. It is not just about you. It's about us and honoring the story. And it's always about company and the values of the companies. We understand them as a collective, you know.
Yeah.
I love that, honoring the story. I love that that you mentioned that. It sounds exactly where we should be moving, honoring our story. So we have one more question that we're going to discuss, and then I'm going to leave you to continue. This question is from Brett. Brett says, recently a situation was raised in a public forum where the organization was accused of racial bias during a recruitment process. Upon review, the organization realized that there likely was some bias, whether conscious or not. The aim should be to discuss this with a wider community in business and correct this behavior. How have you approached these conversations successfully with other organizations in the past? Jane, I feel that this kind of moves into the next chapter that we're going to be discussing anyway, right? So, Brett, this is upcoming. Stand by, and I am moving back to the sidebar.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. I like what you mentioned about values, Luntu, and about the story being central, and Tsidi, what you said about actually embracing different mindsets. So I agree. I think if you want to all have the same mindset, you're going to go into trouble. I think if you have the same values, like you mentioned Ubuntu, Tsidi, then you can embrace different mindsets and ways of thinking. I was actually quite disappointed the other day. I was speaking to somebody who claims to have a very innovative organization, and they are very innovative in so many ways. But then they said to me, if I'm looking out to find additional staff for them, can I find people who went to very similar schools, as in high schools, because they believe that they will have a similar approach to problem solving? And I said, sure. Now that is the one thing that you've said to me that makes me think you're probably not as innovative as you might, because you know, yes, let's have the same values, let's value the story, let's value Ubuntu, but let's not all think the same way. That's going to stand in the way. So let's talk about how you have gone about breaking down barriers in the workplace. And I appreciate what Brett said about the interview process. And I think that's something I see in my training, is that people's bias gets in the way. And I find that hiring managers, if I alert them to the different types of bias and they start to gain self-awareness, a lot of them are really quite eager to overcome it because they see the negative impact it has on their hiring process, that they don't normally hire the right people. But for you working with employees who are already in the organization, where have you seen success in breaking down those barriers between people? What approaches have you used that have helped you establish a human connection? So Tsidi, let me ask you first, and then Luntu, if you could share after Tsidi, that would be wonderful. Tsidi, yes.
All right. When I started into running my own business, I started as an entrepreneur for about 20 years ago, 22 years to be exact. But in the space where I was working, in the mines, one of the GMs there said to me, Tsidi, I would like you to coach me on issues of racism and sexism, because I was raised a certain way, and biases. I was raised a certain way. My mother was Afrikaans. My mother was barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen, and that is the way things were meant to be. But now you are challenging me to change. So I would need to be helped to do that. And I said to him, I'm not a coach. But he said, from what you've taught us, the workshops that we've been in with you, I'm convinced that you are the best person to learn to be a coach on me and coach me on these issues. So that is how I started my coaching journey, and I started going on courses and I learned, and that is how I became a coach. But yes, one of the things that really has worked for me is to actually coach people on issues of diversity and inclusion. Because say these things are unconscious, because nobody wakes up in the morning and say, today I'm going to discriminate unfairly against this group of people. Nobody does that, but it just happens because that is the way that we've been socialized, that is the way that we have been taught. So coaching on issues of diversity and inclusion is very, very helpful. The other thing that I also do is to conduct experiential workshops on issues of bias, unfair discrimination, racism, sexism, etc., ageism, classism, and rankism has become a big thing over the years as well. But I'm calling them experiential because in those workshops, people develop from their own experiences. Jen said earlier on, if we have all experienced, 90% is experienced bias, then we have been biased ourselves. So because of that, it helps for people to share from their own experiences and build models and formulae that will help them to work against that. So the workshops are experiential and they are solution focused. And storytelling that Luntu also works with is a big element of that, because you can only appreciate and have empathy for others when you know their stories. And it's amazing how people have worked for 15, 20 years and they don't even know each other's story. When I come to work, some people argue that leave your challenges outside. When I come to work, I'm bringing the whole of CD, the whole package. So it's just important for people to recognize that. Okay, the other work that I do, I mentioned it lightly earlier on, is to actually audit policies, practices, and procedures and be able to help make sure that they are anti-discrimination or anti-unfair bias of any form. And also to put in place measures that will create an all-inclusive environment, like maybe bringing people, like doing the work that Luntu does. And I use industrial theater a lot, and Luntu and I have been speaking on the side because I do work with a guy called Ter Holman, who's also an actor, and I would like to work with Luntu. And I get excited when I think of the richness of me and my age and my background and him and his age and background and what we bring together. So it's important to create an all-inclusive environment and let people to experience that, to see it and to experience it, and almost in the act, to see themselves in that act as the story is being told through the act. I think dialogue and conversations are very powerful that are managed in the workplace. I've managed some of those, and it works very, very well. And people can get to talk about stuff, and people can together have conversations that lead them to common decisions on how to deal with certain objectives and goals in the organization. Thank you.
Love it, Sidi. Thank you. And I love how you work with the individual and with the groups. So, being a coach myself, I really appreciate that one-on-one experience that is sometimes so helpful for helping people to overcome a unique block in their thinking or something that they struggle with, which prevents them from being able to grasp a certain concept. And then to have the group experiences, and as you mentioned, the storytelling, which I know you mentioned Luntu does, and I also know Luntu does, and just love it. So can't wait to hear more from you, Luntu. I know I first actually met you through a video that I saw when I was doing some work for, well, I'll say the name because it's on their website, for NGen. And going onto their website, I saw this video of a workshop that you had done for them using theatre, and just how effective it was in just breaking down those barriers. So please, also share with us some more about how you've broken down barriers in the workplace.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you, Mama Tidi. It was for me. So what was interesting for me when I grew up in the UK, as I said earlier on, and when I came back to South Africa, and then I'd start to go, let's say, to certain shops, certain stores, and I just saw a huge disengagement. I just felt like I was really dismissed. No one was interacting with me. Hello, how are you today? I'm okay. There was no energy. There was a lack of energy, and it just got me really frustrated. And I started to ask questions, where's the problem? And then I realized that there was a huge disconnection between management and employees. It's like, yes, you're just there for the paycheck, but there was nothing else that you was adding. There was no sense of value for the employee. And for me, that was just like, okay, then what would I do if I was in their shoes? And I understood the value of theater, because I'm like, okay, I'll connect, I'll make eye contact, I'll make sure they hear me when I speak, there is clarity. I'll make sure I'm confident, there's something, make sure that whoever comes here, they get the best service, that they want to come back because of the service I've given to them. So those are the attributes I would bring. And then I was like, you know what? I got that from theater. Why don't I start then something that's going to help to empower people in their workspaces and give them the confidence they need and be true, authentic to themselves? And that's when the theater, adding theater games and going into companies and sharing that experience. So rather than talking about it, oh guys, you're supposed to listen to each other, oh guys, you're supposed and have it like as a theory, we do it practical. So we help them to embody the skills, the soft skills, to understand body language, to understand energy, the importance of energy. Why you bring a certain energy in a workspace, and what can it do? What effect can you have on other people when you bring a certain energy? If you bring an optimistic energy, when you bring a positive energy, when you're ready to engage. And there's something that we use as actors, and it's called, especially when you do improvisation, it's called yes and. So it's yes, I take your suggestion, and then you add to it. So rather than say, so I bring something up, I come to a scene, and then you don't know what I'm going to do, I just do the scene. You're not going to say, Lunti, stop doing that. You're going to say, yes, and then you're going to go along with the scene, and then you're going to add on top of that. And that's where I think the work that I do is really important, because it's about engaging and connecting with one another. And then the element of storytelling. Storytelling is so powerful. So one of the clients I did was Pick and Pay, and I remember after the workshop, the staff, one of the managers was like, you know what? I never knew that my staff had to suffer like this in the morning to get to work at 5 o'clock. There was a different shift in him, and that was more of a human level, where he saw them as human beings and not just as people who are coming in to make numbers and hit targets and just serve people. There was a different shift, and I think that's where that conversation starts, and people are able to interact with one another and have empathy for one another and have sympathy for one another, and then you are able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and we're all here for the same goal, for the same purpose, but most importantly, we see each other as human beings. And when we see each other as human beings and work from a place of love, a place of kindness, a place of being able to connect you, I see you for who you are as a human being, you become a lot more productive, and you add in that person's life. You're not just there just as a number. No, you see value in them, and that's so important.
Yeah, I love, as Jennifer says in our chat box, storytelling keeps coming up. And I agree with both of you that when people tell their stories, it really establishes that human connection and fosters empathy and fosters kindness. And even in training competency-based recruitment skills, I train candidates to tell stories in interviews and train managers to ask for stories in interviews, because it makes it so much more real and alive, and it's not just a theory. You really get to know the person who you want to bring on board. And I love that you're saying that once somebody is already employed in an organization, it's not a time to stop telling the stories, it's a time to tell more stories and really experience the connection through that.
Yeah, because I think these barriers can create a sense of fear. And once we're operating from a place of fear, you're not able to be truly authentic, because you're scared of making mistakes. You're scared of so many things. You're so anxious. There's so much anxiety in you, and therefore your work itself becomes almost a reflection of what's inside. And anything that you do, perhaps you just do it for the sake of doing. You're not thinking about outside the box. You're not thinking, actually, we can actually do this. We can implement this, and take it forward to management, knowing that your idea is not just going to be shut down. And that's an environment a healthy environment that you want to be able to create. And I know sometimes the games, especially the games that I do, it's always funny, because you get into a room, we make a nice circle. I'm like, okay, guys, we're gonna go, and then you can see sometimes management, they're like, no, I'm not doing that. You're part of this. It's part of the team. You gotta be committed to the team. You gotta be committed to what we're doing today. And as they start committing themselves, everyone starts loosening up. We'll say, okay, let's do this. We're all in it together now.
Love it. So much fun. And I think when people laugh as well, I also love, in training, when people laugh, they really learn. And they learn without even realizing that they're learning. So I love that sense of even being able to bring humor into things. Really excellent. So I see we have about 10 minutes left. I want to ask a couple of things, Brett. Firstly, the part of your question that you feel is not answered yet, if you could just flag that with Jen or type it into the chat box so we can make sure we really do answer your question. And maybe we can end off, CD and Luntu, with you just sharing if people are in a position where they're like, sure, this sounds great. I know we all have bias. There's not a person who doesn't have bias. And as we said in the beginning, and as you flagged, CD, a lot of it is unconscious. But if I am an individual or I am an organization and I want to start addressing bias, I want to start breaking down those barriers and fostering that human connection, where do I start? How do I go about it? CD?
Okay. As an individual, I would encourage you, based on the examples that I gave of the things that I have done, including coaching and experiential and solution-based interventions, I would encourage you to identify like-minded people that can give you a voice for this work to be done. Because if you are the only person, it might put a lot of burden on you, and it might, a good idea might end up starting to fizzle out and just be something that you're passionate about and something that you desire, as opposed to something that you drive and something that you make sure happens. Okay. So yes, I do believe in your life speaking before you, so people see the example in you, but it helps to get the whole organization to appreciate the power of diversity, the power of an all-inclusive environment. So I would encourage the person to speak to some of us to see how they can mobilize within the organization to be able to create that environment, so to speak. And I saw somebody commented that organizations don't do this because they think they're soft skills. And yes, they do. And I normally say to organizations I speak to, especially senior managers, I always say the soft skills that are hard skills. Why? Because we don't embody them. So we just leave them out there and we're thinking they're going to translate into something. So they are actually very hard skills. They are harder than putting a nail on the wall, which might require hard physical work. But what makes them very hard is the fact that you need to embody them. You can't just speak them or hear them. You need to embody them. So that one person wants to make a difference, like I do when I speak to CEOs and MDs of companies. I encourage them to get their leadership. And I always like to start at the leadership level in an organization so that it can be one organization called it top down and then bottom up. But I like to start at the top so that the top can send that message in the organization. It's not something people have tried to work on issues of unfair bias, unfair discrimination, racism, sexism, etc. for years. Over four decades, they've tried to do that, and it does not work. So you cannot do it alone. You need to have people and form an alliance, have people that are like-minded that can together be able to push this.
Excellent, thanks, Tidi. And I think those kind of those things that have kind of soft skills, I think they are trainable. Sometimes people think, oh, it's not trainable if it's a soft skill. But it is possible to break down barriers. It is possible to overcome bias. And those skills and those qualities are more and more important in our future of work if we're going to be able to collaborate and collaborate over competition. So love what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Luntu, your wisdom that you would like to share on that, please.
Yeah, I think for me it would be the first thing, how do you add value? How do you see adding value to the people around you? I think that's such an important thing to sort of identify. And are you adding value? Or are they just once again just here just to do a task, or just here making numbers? And then also then going, how do people feel? Are they happy to be here? And once you have identified those things, then how do I create, or how do I find a program that is gonna make them happy, that is gonna help them to add value into their lives? And then that's when you use programs like coaching, like what Mama Tidi does. That's how you offer you come to people like myself, who are gonna have a training program to help them to come together to to create a space of, once again, of empathy, of productiveness. But once again, it always goes, go back to the individuals. How do we work with the individuals that we have within our workspace to create value for them, to make them to feel that they are important, they are worthy to be here. There's a reason why they were hired. They mean something, and because that's an empowerment. That is a place of empowerment. Because once someone says, okay, I'm not just a number, they feel so empowered. They feel like actually they're ready to fight for the company because they're valued. And by you bringing in trainees and adding programs, it shows you that you're taking action to bring that difference in their lives, in the company, and to add that value in their lives.
Love it. Thanks, Luntu. And as Eddie said, it's taking those bits that are uncomfortable and bringing them out into the spotlight.
Absolutely.
And discussing them so that people really feel that they are valuable and that they can add value.
Yeah.
Jen, welcome back.
Well, I'm just here to come say goodbye to everyone because we really can. We know that Judy has the next meeting at 2:00, so I'd love to give her a couple of minutes before she starts. So let's end this off. I wanted to say to everyone who engaged with us, Brett, Eddie, Kelly, Celeste, Liesel, everyone who's mentioned some wisdom here today. It was absolutely amazing to hear from all of you. Tsidi, Luntu, thank you so much for being here. I can see this being a road show with public tickets. I can see people wanting and reaching out to you to give more coaching sessions, and so that we can all learn to be unbiased and less biased going into the future, because at present we are on 94.4% of us have experienced bias, which means we also have some bias. So we all have a little bit of work to do, I think.
Yeah.
And that's it for me. Thank you, Tsidi, again, so much for your time, so much appreciated. Luntu, thank you. It was wonderful to get to know you yesterday and today and in our previous chat as well. Jane, it was a fantastic one as always.
Yes, thanks, Jen.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much, everyone. And please do, I think Jen has probably already posted the links to our LinkedIn profiles in the chat box. Otherwise, I know she is busy with that or done that. So please do connect with Tsidi, with Luntu, with Jen, myself, if you haven't already. Please do join Touch Base if you haven't already. And we really, Jen will be posting the recording there, so you can go back to it for those bits that you missed. But thank you once again for everyone. We really love today. We really appreciate your time and generous sharing of your wisdom and expertise. Thank you, Tsidi. Thank you,
Thanks for inviting us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for inviting us.
Everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Woo!
everyone.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Jane. Till next time.
Bye, Jen. See you.
See you again soon, everyone.